How about you introduce?
Hey guys, welcome back to the Remind podcast. I'm Dr. Ashley Morland and I'm joined by David Masterton. And today is a little bit of a follow on from our last episode. Last episode, we spoke a lot about what we don't process, we project.
Yeah.
And we sort of introduced this kind of concept of coming to be with someone in their emotion, in the mess, in the chaos, in the intensity of their emotion. And what we were wanting to follow on with today is a little bit of an extension of that, of what it means to hold space and how can we co-regulate to be able to support others. And in this case, we're mostly going to be talking about a parent-child relationship, but ultimately this skill to hold space is so important even in all of our adult relationships. So what does holding space mean to you, Dave?
Yeah, well, I'll come back to that, but definitely, like the last episode, it was what we don't process, we project, and we spoke about how that projection looks in your life. Love it. It's made a comeback, guys. If you're not on YouTube, you got to check it out. It's great. It's here.
Smash the subscribe button for
It's
more of this.
Ash's lenses.
Ash's
Um,
lenses.
so we talked about the fact that if you don't process something, you're always going to look through that. Well, you're going to have that prism, that frame, that lens, that tint of I'm not worthy, it's not fair, or, insert whichever one it is here. And so we spoke about how that can manifest in your life and how to identify it if you're not sort of in
Yeah.
tune with this is a projection. And we touched on the how do you process it? Or
Yes.
what would it have looked like
Yeah.
if you didn't pick up that in the first place? Because the one thing about life and the one thing that Ash and I never sort of talk about is the fact that you can only be okay if you live a perfect life. No, it is all about how you process your life and carry the things you want to carry and let go of the things you don't want to carry.
Yeah.
And
Really. I just had this really vivid image of like if the second you were born, someone pressed a stopwatch, like started a stopwatch. And let's say at, I don't know, however many thousand hours, something really traumatic happened, or you had a need, or you felt a big emotion and it wasn't processed. The stopwatch keeps running, but you take that unprocessed emotion with you
as of that point.
as of that moment into the running stopwatch. And so, what I really saw here was you will continue to carry that with you into your future. Time doesn't heal wounds. It's not like this thing where you go, oh, well, if you just let the stopwatch run for 5,000 hours, then you'll be healed. That isn't the case. The healing has to come from the processing, and the processing comes at the time whenever you choose to process it. That might be in minutes, it might be in hours, it might be in days or years. So
But
time
it's quite interesting. What is one thing that everyone's heard their parents say? Time heals all wounds.
time heals all wounds.
Now, they're not wrong because eventually, and again, it depends on what you call about healed, right? So let's go back in the day. Healed would mean you don't cry about it anymore,
Or you
right?
move
Or
on, you get
you move on.
remarried, or like just
Yep.
move on. Build
Yep.
up,
So,
my childhood? Where? I've got all these big emotions, it's so big. I'll build a bridge and get over it.
yep. Love it.
Common one. Yeah.
Love it. And so I guess in that sense, it's sort of like, yes, over time, you will learn how to manage it. It's not healed. Even though the saying itself, you can suppress something and it won't come back at you directly. It'll come back in other ways.
Through your lenses because it's still within you, but it's dormant and it's the dipstick. When you pull it out, that's what's coming out with it.
Yep. And so when we sort of spoke about that episode back then, it was sort of highlighting. If you haven't watched it, go back and have a great look. It's a
It was gold. One of our best.
precursor to this one. And now we're talking about, okay, this episode is not about how do we front run any potential issues that could cause a trauma. No, it's how do we sit and process through that. It's not like how do we dodge the storm, it's how do we deal with the storm. And
Yes.
so,
I love that. So, oh my gosh, I'm having such a big like revelation right now because a little while ago I listened to a worship song that I must have listened to 100 times. Like,
mm,
and I've heard it 100 times. But it was like I was hearing this one line for the first time and it smacked me in the face. And then it
ooh,
showed up in so many different
mm,
ways. And it's from Psalm 23. And it says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. And
yeah, I like that
the
one.
thing
Yeah.
that smacked me so hard is it doesn't say no evil will come.
No, you're in the belly of the beast, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's
And
okay.
that is just
Yeah.
such a revelation for me in life
Mm,
in going, the hard times are gonna come. The people are
absolutely.
gonna hurt you. The
Mm,
invitations for you to react are always gonna show up. You're gonna go through struggle, you're gonna go through challenge, you're gonna be in the
mm,
wilderness, you're gonna experience all these things, but you don't have to fear that because I am with you. And what
mm.
is I am with you? It's this.
Yeah,
I am
it's
with
that.
you. I'm here.
It's
I've got you. I'll carry
mm.
you. We're in this together.
And so let's circle back to the question you asked me right at the start. What is holding space? Well, a David of yesteryear wouldn't know what holding space was unless I was standing in a car park, stopping someone else from getting in
Holding
there,
space
right?
is puffing your chest out to take up as much physical space as possible.
Yeah, don't mess with me,
There you
kind
go.
kind of
Another thing,
thing.
if you're
Yeah.
watching the YouTube channel, that's a special gift
Oh,
just for you.
I mean, Ash is just the gift that keeps on giving when it comes to the start of these episodes.
Mm,
I'm generally a goofy guy, but for some reason you're outshining me, so we're going to have to do something about that. Not that I'm competitive at all.
no.
But it used to be if someone, so coming back to what was holding space, wasn't aware of it. I was a nice guy. I wanted to help people when they were sad,
Mm,
so it would be distraction,
yeah.
make them laugh, or
Oh, and you can
or
be caring.
yep,
Doing this because I care about you. I
yep,
don't like to see you upset.
absolutely. Or
Oh,
tell them all the bright sides of life. There's a silver
yeah.
lining in all of this. Don't feel that way, and because that's
Explain and justify why they shouldn't feel that and why it's so much better than the way they're seeing it.
yeah. So it's all very logical.
Yeah.
It comes from that part comes from the mind. However, what it does is and we were all taught that way, and we were taught that way because that's the way society accepted it, and that's the way
Mhm.
our parents were taught, and our parents are taught. It's just we're in a changing of the system, and so we're all learning this brand new at the start. No judgment.
Yeah.
Now, what is holding space? If someone's feeling like shit and they're sitting in the mud, you just go sit in the mud with them, and just go, hey, whatever you need, I'm here.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to be
Yeah.
alone. This is muddy. It's brown. It's sticky and smelly. But you don't have to. You don't have to. You have to do it by yourself. If you want
Yeah.
to talk about it, talk about it. If you don't want to talk about it, that's cool.
Totally. I love that. We, in our last round of Rise and Thrive, I took the participants through a process all around this. It was specifically about this. And the really interesting thing is people were most shocked by how little they said in that healing process, but
Mm,
more so by the healing power of presence and safety. Holding, and that's ultimately what holding space is, right? It's not about
mm,
justifying, it's not about convincing them or distracting them or taking them out of the moment. It's about joining them in their moment and just being in the moment with them, and
mm.
without the judgment, without fear,
And
without
yeah,
condemnation, without a time limit, just being present with
you're
them.
and feeling, and you'll generally find when you tap into that, you feel what they feel. We've been so accustomed to how could I be doing nothing, right? Because a lot of the time when you're sitting there, we've been sort of shown you got to fill it with something,
Mm,
words, advice, laughter, distraction, words of encouragement. You got to be, you got to. We've been taught to do something.
Even physical touch can be
Yeah,
another way to escape the discomfort of presence.
yeah. And so it's sort of like, imagine a time where you just sort of sit there, nothing said, and they turn to you and go, "God, I feel so much better. Thanks for just being here." And
Yeah.
you go, "But I did nothing."
Yeah.
But did you? Did you
Isn't
do
it
nothing?
crazy? Do you know, recently I just felt prompted to hug someone, just to hug them. I didn't know why, didn't have any context what was going on in their lives.
Mm,
They had a smile on their face, so outwardly to the world, everything was fine, and I just felt prompted to give them a hug. And I hugged them just for they went to pull away after a couple of seconds, and I held them tight. Really, I held them firmly and I said, "We're not done yet." And I just held them,
wow.
and they burst into tears and, like, literally just almost not collapse, but you know how when someone really
Mm,
just lets go and their body just goes, ugh, and
mm.
you are holding them.
But how funny is that? How many people, and I'm one of them, sort of thought, "Are you overstepping your mark here?"
Yeah.
Because
Isn't
it's
it
sort of like, "Oh, hang on, am I doing something that's not consensual? Am I
isn't
doing something that's beyond that?" And look,
isn't that interesting? And it comes down to discernment. You can't just do that to anyone at any time. It has
bingo,
to come down to discernment.
bingo,
And
bingo, bingo.
so this was
Yeah.
in the context of where obviously we already have relationship. I know them on some level.
Mhm.
To me, it was a Holy Spirit prompting, hold her.
Yeah, it was
Sometimes,
that discernment, yeah.
yeah, and sometimes, and also I think spiritually, discernment's so important because you have to first of all know the voice. For me, I have to know the voice of
Mm,
God. I have to know what that sounds like. I have to know how they speak. I have to be
mhm.
able to discern the promptings. But then I also have to overcome this fear of judgment that comes up like, what? That's weird. I'm not going to do that.
What if she gets angry? What
Yeah,
if what
what?
if what if what if someone looks at me and goes, "What the hell have you done?"
Yeah, and so for me, it was about trusting that moment,
Mm,
trusting what I was being led to do, and it was so beautiful, and it allowed for a
mm,
release, so that without not a single word, I didn't need to know what was going on for her, I didn't need to know the stories, I didn't need to know anything else. I had a prompting that there was
mm.
something going on for her. I joined her and held her. I held space for her through a hug, and she was able to release. And I have people say to me
Wow.
quite often that my hugs are magical. The number of times I make people cry just from a hug because it is such an embrace. It's firm, it's
Mm.
safe, it's I am a professional hugger. I'm
Well, it's
very
a
good at
it's a
hugging.
it's a presence, right? It's an energy. It's that in, in what modern world would call intangible. It's that intention. It's
If you're
just
safe
that
with me. What does a
yeah.
hug Okay, that's a cool question. What does a hug say to you? So if someone comes and hugs you and they're like a bit awkward and they pat you on the back and it's like their legs are a meter apart, but they like come in like this at the top, and
Yeah, yeah.
what does that tell you? What does that
Well,
feel
they're
like and
they're
tell
they're
you?
they're doing it purely for ceremony.
Could be ceremony, yeah. Does it
Yeah.
anything else? Anything else come to mind?
Well, they don't want to be doing it, but they're doing it because of some societal norm. They
Mhm.
feel as though they have to.
How do you
At
hug someone who's dirty? Who's really dirty and muddy and gross?
Well, depends who they are. It doesn't matter. Like if that
Hypothetically, play the game with me.
but to be honest, I don't care because I'd treat it as a bit of fun as well. If someone needed a hug and they was dirty as hell, I'd still hug them
Yeah, so would I. I would, generally, I would, but when I
because
think
I
about
don't I
that,
don't give out my hugs freely, as
yeah,
I know you don't. But it's that sort of it's not like you just walk down the street and your arms are out with a sign saying free hugs.
yeah,
But it's like with those people that it's when you're being called to do something and to bring in physical touch and to hug, it's an embrace. And so if you're going to embrace, you're going to embrace no matter what it is.
yeah. Totally.
And
Well,
and
and it's relationship, right? Because you said when it's
yes.
people you know. So isn't that interesting? Because it's about the level of safety, the relational safety that you have with someone. And I think back when I was a child, my grandparents had many, many brothers and sisters. So we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of family members where I grew up. And
Right.
one of their brothers owned a mountain. And so famously, Arnie's
Owned
mountain
a
owned
mountain.
a mountain. So
So first time I've
famously,
heard someone say I've owned a mountain.
yeah,
Okay.
right. So it was Arnie's mountain. And we used to go up. They would have these family gatherings with hundreds of people. Most of them were strangers to me. I didn't know them.
Mm,
Yes, they were my dad's aunties and uncles, and they were my dad's extended family, but I did not know them. They were not known to
mm,
me. So there was no
mm.
relational safety. So when I think about as a child, I was forced to hug people or be in close proximity to people, and my spirit was going, I don't feel safe. I don't, that's not comfortable to me because we were not in intimate relationship,
Yeah.
right? So when I think about a hug, if we are carrying our own wounding, we
Mm,
cannot hold space for others. If we are carrying our own wounding in that moment, we are going to be going, oh, this proximity feels uncomfortable for me. Or this silence feels uncomfortable for me. Or this feels
mm,
uncomfortable for
mm,
me. Or this
mm,
is bringing up a lot for me that I need, you need to co regulate me now. And so I
mm.
think back to me as a child in those experiences going, oh, this is it would be a stiff, like one of these kind of weird hugs that you go,
But you're
if I
doing it
then went and hugged
because
my grandmother or my grandfather,
yeah.
same age, same, same everything else, but there was relational safety. I was
Mm,
known by them. They were known to me, and I would go and run and hug them, and they would embrace me. Safety versus
mm.
unsafety.
Yeah, and how often is it sort of like, don't be shy, don't be rude, give
Yeah,
your
because
auntie,
what does it
your
say about
uncle,
me?
or exactly.
Yeah,
And sort of
totally.
like if the kid's sort of like, "Hey, I see you 3 times a year. I'm not down for this."
Mhm.
Okay, no stress.
I pre-frame our family before because we live interstate from all of our families. So my kids, now that they're older and they've developed their own independent relationships, it's a little bit different. But when we
Mhm.
were young and time in relative to the overall time felt so much bigger, if
Mm.
we only saw family twice a year, to a young child, that 2 times a year feels like many years. It's like a
Oh,
lot of
it's
time has passed,
massive.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I would pre-frame my family and just say, "Hey, I know that you love them so much, and I know you wanna spoil them and you wanna cuddle them and all that sort of stuff." That's gonna be overwhelming for them because to them, you are not known to them because they see you twice a year.
They'd
So
they'd see your friends. They'd see your friends
totally.
more than that
Totally.
family. Yeah.
Exactly. And so until they get older, usually around the age of 7 or 8, when the front parts of their brain start to develop more and they can draw more association with people, that shifts. But in those
Mm,
really younger years, forcing kids to be in close proximity, hug or kiss or do anything close to people who are ultimately strangers to them is
mm,
asking them to override their own natural nervous system's signal that says, I don't feel safe right now, but because you don't want to upset them, you're going to force me to
mm,
push through my feeling of unsafety just to make them happy. And
mm,
so
mm.
that was a no-go for me. I would always pre-frame family saying, I don't force my kids to hug you. I don't force anything on my kids. If they don't initiate it or if they say no, I'm okay with that. And so
Yeah.
even with my nieces and nephews now, I'll go, high five, hug, or smile today. I give
Mhm.
them a menu.
Mm,
And so then they get to pick. Sometimes they get hugs, sometimes it's just a high five kind of day. But
mhm.
that in itself is honoring their safety, honoring their that relational safety and boundaries, and that's another form of holding space.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because it's holding space is almost just bringing your essence to the situation, but not your intellect, not your
Yes,
mind,
or ego.
not your
Ego.
culture or your traditions or anything like that. You're
Yeah.
simply just bringing your essence
Totally. And how
into it.
different is it, like, one of my nephews in particular, um, he chops and changes all the time. Sometimes he'll come up and give me cuddles, and he'll wanna be, like, sitting on my lap, and it's awesome,
Mm,
and other times he doesn't wanna come anywhere near me, and I haven't changed. That's where he's at that day.
Mm.
But if I was showing up with my ego, I would be upset over that.
"Oh, you don't like me today?"
Exactly.
"Oh,
And
no,
so
no, it's not that." Mm, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so I think that even that understanding relational psychological safety, that is such a key part of holding space. And we tie holding space in with co-regulation. So that's just
Mm.
honoring people through honoring their boundaries, allowing it to be okay for them to decide how close feels too close, etc. But
Mhm.
if we come back to this idea of being with someone in their chaos, that's co-regulation.
Mhm.
And I've recently had a massive revelation around self regulation.
Okay.
Here it is. I have a different version of self for every second that passes in my whole entire life. That stopwatch I was talking about,
Mhm.
every micro moment that ticks by on that stopwatch of my life, I am a different version of Ash. The Ash I am
Mm.
today is different to the Ash who was married to her first husband. The Ash I am today is different to the Ash I was when I was a small child living at home. I'm different to the Ash I was when I worked at the university. So,
Mm.
on my timeline, the stopwatch ticking by second by second by second, they are all my versions of self. And so, if I'm having an emotional reaction come up in today's version of Ash that does not match what's actually happening, it is a past self's emotion that has been unprocessed that is showing up in present self
Mm.
Ash's reality. So, what is self regulation? Self regulation is about recognizing that this index finger is some previous version of Ash. The Ash that was married to Cole, the Ash that was a small child living at home, the Ash that worked at Subway, the Ash that got her heart
Mm.
broken by her first boyfriend. That all those previous versions of Ash is self.
Mm.
They are past versions of self. And so self regulation is about present Ash having awareness of what's coming up in her body and present Ash being able to go and be with that past version of Ash and help them to regulate. I'm with you. I've
Mm.
got you.
Mm.
You're safe now. Everything's okay. And supporting them, encouraging them, nurturing them, loving them, holding them. And when they come back to safety, present version of Ash does too.
Yeah.
And
It's
so,
all interlinked. I think you
isn't
mentioned
it?
something like that a couple of episodes ago, actually.
Oh, I can't
Um,
remember. But
and it's really true because if you're there sort of going, okay, I am not my trauma. I am not my feeling I am right now. Right? I'm feeling this now, but it's not
which
my
is
whole
true.
essence.
It's
Yeah.
true. But it's still part of you. It's still part of your history. It's still part of your story. It's part of your
Correct.
timeline.
Well, it's something that you can work with. It's not something you have to survive through.
Yes. Or take with
Which
you
correct, which
or
is
get
which is
over.
which is the difference between it is not you, it is a part of you. Because
Yeah,
otherwise, if it's you, then it's something you're just going to have to survive, like a ball and chain that you drag through the rest of your life.
totally.
Yes, it's there, but it's something that you can actually work through. Now, how do you work through that? Because the current person now who's feeling this, for some reason, hasn't been equipped up until now to deal with it. Because
Mhm.
if I did, it'd be gone,
Mhm.
right? Well, and that's where you can join these two synergies, these two feelings, these two selves, these
Yeah.
two, however you want to sort of call it, in together without having to actually do anything.
Yeah.
And for me, being a very analytical brain, I've always had to bring it back to how do I stop doing everything and start to do nothing, because that's the real heart, the healing part,
Yep.
and
How do I
quieting.
stop doing everything and start being?
Yes, and but it all starts for me from the sort of logical, where it's sort of
Yeah.
like, okay, you can visualize it. right? If you feel as though it's a previous a version of yourself, go back to that version of yourself. Go back to the person that was
Mhm.
experiencing it, not necessarily the event, but
No.
you in that time.
Yes.
And then ask it, what do you need? If you don't already intrinsically know what it is, you can ask it, what do you need?
Yeah. Well, what do you need to hear? What do you need to know?
Mm,
You can hold them, hug them. I
yep.
physically hug and hold my own real now body to be able to embrace them and bring that safety. And
Mm,
the thing, this is where it really, really stung me because I've been saying for years, if you never learned to co-regulate, you will never know how to self-regulate. I've been saying that for years and I totally got
mm,
it.
mm,
But it wasn't until this happened that I understood why. And when I say happened, I'm like, okay, so it made sense in my mind. I had an image of this actually happening where
mm-hmm,
co regulation is modeling to the child what they will then become and do for themselves and their past versions of self when they're older. So as a child, how do you learn what this looks and feels like? How do you learn what it looks and feels like to have someone come and be with you and go, I've got you, I'm here, and just hold you and hug you
mm,
and be okay with all of the messiness that is your emotion, that is your life, that is your circumstance, but to still love you and be with you in that. Now, when I ask clients about this, and I'll say, tell me one example in your life where someone did that
mm.
in your early life. And so
Well,
far, not
it wasn't common
no.
at all.
And so far, I have never ever had anyone say an example. They can go, it didn't happen. It was always something like this. Stop. Don't do that. Don't cry. Explaining or justifying why they
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't feel that way. Distraction. It was all of these other things, which were the only way they knew how to love us.
Mm.
And that's not
Well, and that's how they were taught, and
absolutely.
it got me actually thinking that co-regulation happens regardless of the outcome. And bear with me on this one, because I know when we talk about co-regulation, it's really about the positive aspects of being able to sit and process. But imagine if co-regulation could also be a negative, as in it is the after event of anything,
Mhm.
and that co-regulation could mean they provide the stimulus for you to suppress.
Oh, it's co-dysregulation.
Okay, yep.
So that's what most of the
Mm,
toxic, dysfunctional, relational issues that exist in our society is co-dysregulation because that's how we
mm.
were raised. And codependence off the back of that, where
Oh, codependence.
your okayness depends on
Yes.
other someone else's okayness.
Yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
if your absolute chaos did not disrupt the safety and peace of your caregiver and they were able to be with you in your chaos and hold you safely, then they are inviting you back into their safety. If someone
Mm,
else is completely dysregulated and completely, off the chain, then they can't come and be with you.
mm.
They're navigating their own dysregulation.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily about having to fix the person.
No,
It's not
it's
like you have to get a screwdriver, a hammer,
never, never.
whatever it is. It's just about being with them to
Yeah,
then allow them to instinctively know that they feel safe, and then the internal intelligence of their own spirit, their soul,
yeah.
will then shine. Because I think we put a lot of we put a lot of emphasis on our own intelligence,
Mm. And it's
and if so,
idolatry, actually. So, spiritually and biblically speaking, when I am having some kind of issue, some kind of emotion, some kind of thing, and I turn to another, I turn to someone else, and I turn to whatever it might be an object or a person or whatever, that's idolatry.
gotcha.
Because what is this? I come back to the verse that I quoted in Psalm 23.
Mm-hmm.
Fear no evil because I am with you. That's this,
Mm.
that presence of being held, of being safely held. If we outsource that to, oh, I'm wearing my crystal today, so I'm safe, then that's idolatry.
Yep.
I'm very conscious of this. This is something really big for me. I'm
Yeah, I know.
conscious of
It's
it because as a practitioner,
yeah.
it is a very fine line for people to not become dependent on me and put me as the idol in their okayness.
Hmm.
It's so important.
Well, look, there's a difference between having tools, right? And I know you love tarot. I know you love astrology. I know you love crystals and all of those type of things.
There's a lot of
But
sarcasm there for people who are new to the channel. Just to clarify.
um,
A past version
but
of us. Let's talk about Ash 5 years ago. She did.
yeah, and look, and if it serves a purpose, it serves a purpose. If you're drawn to it, you're drawn to it. If it's and here's the thing: if you're drawn to it to learn a lesson, you're drawn to it to learn a lesson. If you're drawn to it because it's for you, you're drawn to it because it's for you. Some people stay with it, some people leave it. It's neither here nor there. It's just one of those things. What you're saying is, don't put it down to the reason I'm not better is because my crystal's broken, right? The reason I'm not fixed is because the tarot reader got it wrong. They're having a bad spell.
It's anytime you're
Or
outsourcing it to anything else.
yeah, but what does that look like? Oh, the reason I'm not fixed is because I need new crystals. Well, that's inferring that the crystals you got are broken, or things like that. What you're saying is, if it helps you harness your internal, great. If it's you can only do it with the crystals, well, you might need to look at it because it seems as though you're putting a lot more of a priority on the outsource or the tools
Yes. Tha
than
and that's
you.
it. You can have pretty things around, and they are not idols until you outsource and try and give them power.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. And so I've got to say, brilliant episode, especially. And guys, if you got to this point, and you still haven't seen the episode from last week, do check it out because
Yeah.
they do link
It'll
in
make
together.
so much more sense, and there's so much
Yeah,
value in both of these. Gosh, pe there is
and
so much value in these.
yeah,
I was just gonna
and
say, Dave, sometimes people can get to a point where all of this theory and this is huge revelations for people.
mm,
I think especially if you're able to watch the YouTube channel and you've been able to see what's happening with my fingers to really give you a
mm,
visual demonstration, again, hit that subscribe button and share
yeah,
this because this
mm,
information is really important. But it's the question on everyone's lips then becomes, okay, so I can recognize this and I can understand it and I've had these revelations and it all makes sense, but how do I process it? And
mm,
that it's the processing. So all of the work that we do in Rise and Thrive is taking you deeper in understanding your own wounding, your own past experiences, and we process it. That's
yeah,
where the big processing happens.
absolutely, absolutely. It's an absolute like when we talk about tools, the Rise and Thrive program is a tool to be able to do that because when you can sit in your own self, you'll get nudges as to what you need to do
Yeah.
because that's your intuition.
Yeah.
And if you're called to buy some crystals and send it to Ash, we'll put her PO box in the comments below. And
Oh, I'll put
but
them in the
yes,
pretty rock garden.
all right, guys. Ash, it's been a great one. And we will catch you. Well, actually, we're getting very close to our live.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's actually next week.
Midday on, if you're in Australia, midday on the 4th of April,
Mm-hmm.
we're live. We really
Yep.
hope you'll join us live. We really hope that you'll ask questions, engage with
Yep.
us, chat with us.
You'll be able to post comments and we can answer questions. You can ask Ash all your favorite astrology questions. She'll be able to answer that. And I think it's just going to be something that we're going to be trialing. But what we're going to be talking about is what has the last year, 52 weeks, really, really been? Because this is our first year of doing it and would love to see you all
Mm.
there.
Yeah, and maybe exploring all of the past versions of self and all of the versions that we've grown into and grown out of, and
Yep.
all of our learnings
Absolutely.
and
Oh,
triggers. Oh my
yes.
gosh, can't wait to talk about that. This podcast has brought up a bit, hasn't it?
It certainly has. All right. Till next time. Bye
Bye.
bye.